Every billionaire drug kingpin lived in luxury, but what luxury meant was completely different for each of them. Gilberto and Miguel Rodriguez Orejuela. Gilberto Rodriguez Orejuela and Miguel Rodriguez Orejuela became rich by staying quiet instead of showing off. Rather than living flashy lives, they treated staying unnoticed as their greatest luxury. As leaders of the Cali cartel, they focused on careful planning, money management, and behind-the-scenes influence. During the 1980s and 90s, their organization was widely believed to have controlled a large share of the cocaine trafficked into the United States and Europe, generating billions of dollars in cartel revenue. By avoiding public violence and attention, they remained far less visible than their more notorious rivals. The Rodriguez Orejuela brothers lived in nice but low-key homes in Cali, with clean gardens, strong security, and limited access, more like the houses of business executives than criminals. Inside, their homes were neat and conservative, with good quality furniture, imported items, and modern comforts. Everything was chosen to look ordinary and respectable to neighbors and officials. Nothing about their lifestyle openly suggested cartel leadership, and that was exactly what they wanted. For the Cali cartel, luxury meant fitting in with a wealthy, respected society. The brothers put large amounts of money into legal businesses like pharmacies, banks, real estate, sports teams, and retail stores. According to investigators, these businesses served both commercial purposes and money laundering functions, while also allowing the brothers to move openly in elite circles. Because of this, they could attend public events, meet politicians, and appear to operate legally without attracting much attention. Their everyday lives looked like those of powerful business executives. The brothers' way of traveling followed the same low-key approach. Instead of flashy sports cars or obvious convoys, the brothers used normal luxury sedans and professional drivers that blended into everyday traffic. They did use private planes at times, but these were kept discreet and registered under company names to avoid attention. International travel was typically justified through business activities and legal documentation, keeping movements structured rather than ostentatious. Even their security was kept out of sight. Instead of relying on large groups of armed guards, authorities later alleged that the brothers depended heavily on intelligence networks, corruption, and early warnings. Officials were accused of being bribed to share information, delay investigations, or redirect law enforcement attention. Violence existed within the cartel, but it was usually delegated and kept distant from the brothers themselves. The Rodriguez Orejuela brothers lived as if they understood that real luxury wasn't about showing off, but about feeling safe and in control. Their wealth allowed them to live openly for years, without constantly hiding or fleeing. Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar's rise from street criminal to one of the world's wealthiest drug traffickers began in the 1970s, when he moved from small-scale smuggling to playing a central role in Colombia's cocaine trade. But unlike the Rodriguez Orejuela brothers, Escobar made his wealth impossible to miss. By the early 1980s, Escobar was widely reported to be earning millions of dollars per day in cash, far more than he could reasonably spend. Instead of hiding it behind legitimate businesses and quiet routines, he let the money spill into public view. That excess fueled one of the most extravagant and openly displayed criminal lifestyles of the modern era, marking a sharp contrast with the calm, businesslike approach of the Cali cartel leaders. Escobar turned money into land first, buying vast estates across Colombia, with Hacienda Nápoles becoming the centerpiece of his wealth. The property functioned like a private kingdom, featuring multiple mansions, swimming pools, artificial lakes, private runways, racetracks, and a personal zoo filled with exotic animals illegally imported, including species from Africa. Escobar used the estate as a display of power, inviting politicians, athletes, and cartel figures to witness it firsthand. According to those who later investigated his operations, the message was clear. His riches went far beyond what even Colombia's traditional elite could normally achieve. Inside his residences, Escobar surrounded himself with luxury items. He owned fleets of luxury vehicles, including armored Mercedes sedans, custom SUVs, motorcycles, and sports cars, many of which were rotated frequently for security reasons. Helicopters and private aircraft were kept on standby at his properties, allowing him to travel outside commercial systems and reinforcing his image as someone who operated above the law. Aircraft were used frequently, turning private aviation into a routine tool rather than a rare privilege. Escobar spent heavily on personal indulgences that blurred the line between comfort and absurdity. He was famously reported to have burned stacks of cash to keep his family warm while hiding in remote mountain locations. Large sums were spent on lavish parties, private entertainment, gambling, and gifts for associates, including luxury watches, vehicles, and properties handed out as rewards for loyalty. Money was treated as abundant and expendable, something to be used immediately rather than preserved. Despite his extravagant possessions, Escobar lived surrounded by constant paranoia, which shaped how his luxury was experienced. He rarely stayed in one place for long, moving between estates and safe houses, each stocked with high-end furniture, electronics, and supplies so that comfort followed him wherever he went. Armed guards were always present, often dozens at a time, creating a lifestyle where extreme wealth and extreme danger coexisted daily. For Escobar, luxury wasn't about refinement or public admiration, but about control over reality itself. If he wanted a private runway, he carved one into the land. If he wanted animals no zoo could legally own, they were flown in. If he needed loyalty, he was known to fund entire neighborhoods, paying for houses, soccer fields, and infrastructure as casually as part of his efforts to secure support and influence. He lived like someone constructing his own version of the world. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman built his fortune in secrecy, and his lifestyle was shaped around constant movement and staying out of view. He rose through the Sinaloa cartel by becoming known for his role in logistics rather than public intimidation, controlling smuggling routes that moved cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and eventually fentanyl through tunnels, vehicles, aircraft, and maritime corridors. In this way, El Chapo stood between two extremes. Unlike Pablo Escobar, who displayed his wealth openly and tied himself to famous estates and public power, El Chapo avoided fixed symbols of success altogether. And unlike the Rodriguez Orejuela brothers, who hid behind legitimate businesses and stable routines, El Chapo never truly settled. His wealth did not buy him a calm, respectable life. It bought him mobility. Instead of mansions or boardrooms, his version of luxury was the ability to disappear, relocate, and survive, while his organization continued to function. El Chapo relied on a network of safe houses scattered across Mexico. Each location was stocked in advance with quality furniture, fresh clothing, and essential equipment so that comfort followed him without tying him to a single address. From the outside, these properties appeared ordinary, blending into their surroundings, while inside, they concealed reinforced rooms and hidden escape routes designed for sudden disappearances. El Chapo's most famous luxury assets were tied directly to his obsession with control and security. He invested heavily in custom-built tunnels, as documented by Mexican and U.S. authorities, some stretching for miles beneath borders and cities, equipped with lighting, ventilation, rail systems, and motorcycles mounted on tracks. These tunnels were not improvised hiding spots, but engineered infrastructures costing millions of dollars. When he did spend on himself, El Chapo chose small but valuable items instead of large, permanent properties. He owned luxury vehicles that could be left behind if needed, used private planes carefully to avoid attention, and carried custom weapons, including a handgun decorated with diamonds and engraved with his initials. Jewelry, expensive watches, and tailored clothing were kept mostly out of public view, meant to signal status only to those close to him. Every spending choice was intentional, allowing him to enjoy wealth without drawing unnecessary attention. Even during periods of incarceration, El Chapo's wealth continued to shape his lifestyle. In prison, he was accused of bribing guards, arranging special privileges, and maintaining communication with the outside world. Cells were upgraded, food improved, and schedules manipulated, turning confinement into a controlled environment rather than a restriction. His eventual escape from a maximum security prison through a tunnel built directly beneath his shower highlighted how his financial resources and influence continued to dictate daily reality even behind bars. Kunsa, Kunsa built his fortune by turning territory into near-sovereign control, and his lifestyle reflected a drug lord who lived more like a head of state than a conventional criminal. Operating in the Golden Triangle along the borders of Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand, he controlled large-scale heroin production and trafficking for many years. His wealth came from dominating opium cultivation, refining heroin in protected zones, and taxing every stage of the trade that passed through his territory. By the 1980s, his organization was widely believed by international authorities to be supplying a significant portion of the global heroin market, generating immense and continuous income. His lifestyle was based on controlling territory, not hiding. Kunsa ruled from heavily fortified mountain bases that acted more like small capitals than secret hideouts. These compounds had offices, living quarters, barracks, and storage areas, all guarded by thousands of armed loyalists. He built roads, checkpoints, and communication systems to support his operations, which allowed him to live without constantly worrying about surprise attacks. For Kunsa, luxury came from stability and control over land, not from staying invisible. Inside his homes, Kunsa lived like a ruler. He stayed in large, comfortable houses with servants and constant security. The interiors were filled with imported goods, fine furniture, and reliable electricity and water, things that were rare in the surrounding area. His daily life was protected from hardship. Food, medical care, and safety were always available, provided by the system and territory he controlled. Kunsa's wealth also shaped his public image. He presented himself as a nationalist leader rather than solely a trafficker, funding schools, hospitals, and infrastructure in areas under his influence. These investments strengthened loyalty and allowed him to live openly among local communities as a powerful local authority and benefactor. His way of traveling showed his near-ruler status. Instead of moving in secret, he traveled in guarded convoys along routes he controlled. Vehicles and aircraft were used when needed, with fighters securing each path ahead of time. He didn't have to hide, because his control over the surrounding territory was designed to keep him protected. Dawood Ibrahim. Dawood Ibrahim built his wealth by blending into normal society rather than hiding from it. He rose from the street crime scene in Mumbai in the 1970s and turned a small smuggling operation into a vast international network known as D Company. His income came from activities authorities have linked to drug trafficking, gold smuggling, extortion, real estate schemes, and financial crimes. What set Dawood apart was how deeply his operations were reported to overlap with legitimate businesses, the entertainment world, and political circles, making his criminal activity difficult to separate from everyday life. That approach defined how he lived. Instead of obvious hideouts or fortified compounds, Dawood invested in high-end real estate in cities like Dubai, Karachi, and other international locations, often through family members or trusted associates. These were luxury apartments and private villas in elite neighborhoods designed to look exactly like the homes of successful businessmen. Nothing about them appeared criminal, allowing him to live comfortably while remaining largely unnoticed. Dawood surrounded himself with quiet luxury. His residences were fitted with imported furnishings, modern security systems, and private staff who operated under strict confidentiality. Clothing was tailored and expensive but conservative, designed to signal status only within elite circles. Jewelry and watches were worn selectively, not as public statements but as markers of rank among insiders who understood his position. Transportation played a key role in sustaining this lifestyle. Dawood relied on private flights, chartered aircraft, and discreet ground transport arranged through trusted channels. Travel was planned in advance and routed through jurisdictions where he was believed to have enjoyed protection or influence. Movement was carefully managed and predictable. One of the most defining aspects of Dawood's billionaire lifestyle was his integration into Bollywood and professional sports. He was alleged by Indian authorities and journalists to have financed films, maintained influence within production circles, and cultivated relationships with actors, producers, and directors, using entertainment as both a laundering mechanism and a means of social insulation. Cricket betting and sports-related businesses further embedded his wealth into mainstream culture, allowing his money to circulate openly while his presence remained indirect. Security was managed through distance rather than force. Dawood relied on intelligence networks, political connections, and advanced warning systems instead of visible armed protection. This allowed him to avoid confrontations entirely, preserving a lifestyle where daily routines remained uninterrupted. Violence existed within his organization, but it was typically carried out by intermediaries, creating a buffer between wealth generation and personal life. Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Ismael El Mayo Zambada built his wealth slowly and carefully, and his lifestyle was shaped around staying out of sight. As one of the early leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, he made money over many years by keeping control of drug production, transport, and distribution, while avoiding the public attention that brought down other leaders. His income grew steadily, instead of all at once, allowing him to become extremely wealthy without attracting the attention that often comes with rapid growth. El Mayo's lifestyle focused on routine rather than luxury. He mainly lived in rural parts of Mexico, choosing ranches and farm properties that blended in with the landscape. His homes were comfortable and had modern conveniences, but they were intentionally simple on the outside. His daily life followed a steady routine. El Mayo stayed away from nightlife, big social events, and public places. Family members and trusted associates handled everyday logistics, so he rarely needed outside help. This stable setup allowed him to live in one place for long periods, unlike Escobar, El Chapo, and Dawood, who were more frequently forced to relocate. His transportation was simple and low-key. Vehicles were chosen to blend in with local traffic instead of standing out, and routes were changed quietly to avoid patterns. Aircraft were reportedly used rarely, and often not at all. This kept risk low while still allowing him to move comfortably. El Mayo's security depended more on people than on weapons. He relied on loyalty built over many years, information from local communities, and alleged early warnings from corrupt officials who were willing to help him. Armed guards were used, but they stayed out of sight and blended into everyday surroundings. Violence was kept far from his daily life, which helped everything feel normal. Where El Mayo built his life around staying still and unseen, the next drug kingpin, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, built his power by moving faster and farther than anyone else. Amado Carrillo Fuentes. Amado Carrillo Fuentes built his power around expansion, living as someone whose success depended on how far his operations could stretch, not on how visible he was. In the late 1980s, he rose within the Juarez cartel and turned drug trafficking into a large, organized operation by focusing on air transport. While other traffickers moved smaller shipments, Carrillo Fuentes invested heavily in planes. He used fleets of Boeing 727s and smaller aircraft to fly huge amounts of cocaine directly from Colombia into Mexico. This strategy brought in enormous profits and earned him the nickname, the Lord of the Skies. His wealth flowed into aviation-centered luxury. Carrillo Fuentes owned or controlled multiple private aircraft, hangars, and clandestine airstrips spread across Mexico. Planes were treated as everyday tools rather than rare assets, allowing him to move freely while maintaining distance from ground-level risk. Pilots, mechanics, and aviation specialists were kept on permanent payroll, turning flight into a routine extension of his daily life, rather than an occasional indulgence. On land, Carrillo Fuentes lived in high-end homes that showed wealth without intimidating anyone. His residences had modern designs and comfortable interiors suited for long-term living, with access carefully controlled. These properties were selected for privacy, often placed in wealthy neighborhoods or in remote areas where they wouldn't attract attention. His personal spending was about comfort and showing status only to people he trusted. He wore custom-made clothes and expensive watches or jewelry, but nothing meant to draw public attention. His cars were high-end but discreet, usually driven by others and changed often. He avoided public social scenes and preferred private gatherings, which let him enjoy his wealth without making himself an obvious target. Carrillo Fuentes also spent a great deal of money on influence. Mexican authorities accused him of bribing officials to keep his operations running smoothly and to warn him of problems in advance. This gave him time and stability, so he didn't need to constantly run or surround himself with visible security. Violence existed within his organization, but it was kept away from his everyday personal life. Every one of these men lived like a billionaire. but none of them lived the same life. If you want to dive deeper into organized crime stories, click our next video.